In the last video, we created our actions, our constants, and reducers. So, and what we want to do now is use those actions within our components here to fire off those actions and update our Redux store. So at this point, we have our state set at the component level. We use Axios and then we make that API call right here. And once we get that data, once we update it, we load that data into our component here and render it out. So what we want to do here is we want to actually get rid of this local state here. And we also don't need Axios and we don't need anything inside of use effect. So we are still going to use effect, but from here we are going to dispatch this list products action. So this action right here will now make that API call. It will update that store, and then we will get that data from that store. So I just realized we need to export this. So we are going to export that, and now within here, let's make a few imports. So we are going to import from React Redux, and in here we need to use dispatch. And this is how we are actually going to fire off this action right here. So we are going to use dispatch to fire off list products, and we also need use selectors. So I will explain this in a second. So use selector, and what use selector does is it lets us select certain parts of our state or our Redux store. Sorry. So if we go into our store, we want to access product list. So later on, we will have more and more parts of our state here. And this is how we can actually get specific parts of that state. So we are going to use selector for that. And let's go ahead and actually fire off our first action. So we are going to create a variable and we are going to call this dispatch, and we are going to use dispatch and here. So we are going to say use dispatch and to actually call that action right here. So we need to move that to the left here to actually call this action. We first need to import it. So we are just going to do import, and this is going to be from actions / product actions. And that's going to be list products. So list products, and I just want to make sure I spelled that right. So that's with an S at the end. So to fire this off, we are just going to use dispatch inside of uh, this function. So we are going to say dispatch, and we are going to trigger that. So list product, and we are going to call the function. And this is all we need to update that store. So this action just fired off. We updated that store and we have that data in the store. So we have this error because we don't have products, and we are trying to loop through that right here. So for now, let's just set an empty variable or an empty array. So we'll just do products and we'll say just leave that blank. So we are not going to see data in our template, but we are going to check out here. So if we go into our store, let's go ahead and refresh this, and we'll go into our tools here, Redux Dev Tools. We can see if we go to our state, we can now see data within our products. So this is data from the database. We are now loading it into Redux. If we go in here, we can see the actions being fired off. So we have product list request, then we have product list success. So if I go to another page, let's go into cart and then we will go back. We can see product list request get called and then success. If we go to diff, this is the difference in state. So we can see the state here. So on request loading was true, then loading was set to false. So we actually see how that state uh, changed and how things were being updated. So what we want to do now is actually get this data right here and render it out right here. So we need to select that part of the state and we are going to use selector. So let's go ahead and we'll just say const product list. And for this, we are just going to say use selector, and inside of use selector, uh, we are going to tell it what part of the state we want to get. So we are going to use an arrow function and we are going to say state dot product list. So we are pulling this part of our state right here. So product list, and remember product list is like a sub part of that state. And in here we actually have more options in that state. So if we go into our reducer, we can see that our product list has products. It also has loading and it has this error. So we just want to destructure it and pull all of those out of the state. So we are just going to say const and then we will destructure it. We are going to set this to product list, which is now an object, and we are going to pull out error, and then we'll pull out loading and we'll pull out products. So now I can get rid of this right here. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. And we have our products in here and we are pulling that from our state. So if I save this and we look at our component or in our template, here we can now see the data from that Redux store we rendered out, and we are pulling real data now. So what we want to do to close this video out is actually create like a loading whenever this data is being pulled in, and then actually render out an error message. So for now, we'll just put out some text, and then later on, we'll actually create like a loading spinner right here, and then we'll style that error message. So let's go ahead and go back in here and actually want to pass in dispatch into use effect into this array. So we'll throw that in here, and just underneath latest product, let's go ahead and write that condition. So first we are going to check loading. So remember we load it in right here from the state, and if loading is set to true, so while it's loading, let's go ahead and render out this loading message. So we'll just say with an s2 tag, we will say loading. And then later on, we will make a component for this. So for this, it's loading. And then we also want to check what is going on here as far as the error. So if loading, render loading, and then in here we'll say just say if error, let's go ahead and render. So if we have an error, let's parse this in. We'll just use an s3 tag now and we'll just say error and we'll pass the actual message. So remember with our reducer, we actually get the payload for the error. So we want to render that message out. So we'll go back into your home screen and let's pass this in. Okay. So I will just copy this error and we want to render that out right here. And then we want to check one more time. So if it is neither one of these, if it is not loading and we don't have an error, we want to render this row back. So let's go ahead and I'm going to minimize this, or I will just grab everything inside of this row. I'm going to remove that. I just copied it and I just want to paste that in here. So I want to fix this indentation. Actually, if I auto save it, I think it just fixes it like that. So if loading render loading. If we have an error, render that error. If not, go ahead and render out our template or our row. So if I save this, when we refresh this, we should see a quick message right here. So you should see loading that thing here, and I also want to render that error. So we can go into our action and let just look break this call. Let's just say app products, and we will get back an error. And now we get that status code and what's actually rendering out in this error. So in the next video, we are going to style this. So this actually looks a little bit better, and we are going to add that loading spinner. So before we move on, let's go ahead and just fix this really quick. I will make sure that's back to API and we are getting our data.